The sterile white walls of the hospital's VIP wing were meant to be a sanctuary, a quiet place for healing. But for Chloe, 7 months pregnant and clinging to the fraying threads of her marriage, they became a battleground. Her husband, the charismatic billionaire Marcus Thorne, stood just feet away, schmoozing with donors, oblivious. And then came Isabella Rossi, his mistress, her stilettos clicking like a countdown on the polished marble floor. A whisper of venom, a shove, and the sanitized peace shattered. Chloe's world tilted, the pain sharp and sudden. Little did Isabella know, the man who ran this entire hospital, Dr. Robert Hayes, was watching from the shadows. And he was Chloe's uncle. The chandeliers of St. Jude's Hospital's new pediatric wing dripped light like liquid diamonds, scattering rainbows across the crisp white tablecloths. It was a room suffocating in its own opulence, a testament to the philanthropic power of its attendees. At the center of it all, a vortex of charm and influence, was Marcus Thorne. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, his hand resting possessively on the small of his wife's back. Chloe managed a smile, the fabric of her bespoke maternity gown stretching taut over her swollen belly. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. He, the self-made real estate magnate with a jawline that could cut glass. She, the quiet, elegant beauty, blooming with his air. But Chloe knew the truth. The hand on her back wasn't a gesture of affection. It was an anchor, keeping her tethered to his side. A beautiful prop in the grand play of his life. Their marriage had become a gilded cage, beautiful from the outside, but cold and empty within. The silence in their penthouse apartment overlooking the city was louder than any argument. The chasm between their king-sized bed felt wider than the ocean. He spoke of we and our family, but his eyes were distant, his mind already on the next deal, the next conquest. Darling, you remember Isabella Rossi from the Vancorp merger? Marcus's voice, smooth as aged whiskey, cut through her thoughts. Chloe turned, her practiced smile faltering for a fraction of a second. Isabella was a vision in blood-red silk, her raven hair sleek and severe, her eyes holding a predatory gleam that was aimed squarely at Marcus. She was everything Chloe was not, sharp where Chloe was soft, loud where Chloe was quiet, and utterly, unapologetically ambitious. Of course, Chloe said, her voice a soft murmur. She extended a hand, which Isabella took with a grip that was surprisingly firm, her long, lacquered nails digging slightly into Chloe's skin. Chloe, you're glowing, Isabella purred, her gaze sweeping dismissively over Chloe's baby bump. Pregnancy certainly agrees with you. It makes some women so matronly. But you wear it well. It was a compliment shaped like an insult, a perfectly crafted piece of social cruelty. Marcus, oblivious, chuckled. She's a trooper, juggling the foundation work and getting the nursery ready. I don't know how she does it. He squeezed Chloe's shoulder, a public display for a private lie. He had no idea what color the nursery was, nor had he asked. The conversation flowed around Chloe, a river of stock prices and zoning variances. She felt a wave of dizziness, the baby shifting inside her as if sensing her distress. The air, thick with expensive perfume and false sincerity, was suddenly hard to breathe. "Marcus," she whispered, tugging gently on his sleeve. "I'm not feeling very well. I think I need to sit down for a moment." His focus shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features before being replaced by performative concern. "Of course, darling. Let's get you some air." "No, you stay," she insisted, not wanting to pull him from his element. This was his stage. "The new private suites are just down the hall. My uncle made sure we had one available for the evening, just in case. I'll just go rest there." Mentioning her uncle, Dr. Robert Hayes, the esteemed director of St. Jude's, was a subtle assertion of her own standing. a reminder that she wasn't just Mrs. Thorne. For a moment, it seemed to register with Marcus. He nodded, his expression softening. "All right, don't be long. They're about to start the auction." He gave her a perfunctory kiss on the cheek, his attention already drifting back to a conversation about offshore assets. As Chloe walked away, the sound of the party faded, replaced by the hushed, sterile quiet of the hospital corridor. The polished floors reflected the cool, impersonal glow of the recessed lighting. She found the suite, a quiet haven of muted tones and plush furnishings, and sank onto the edge of the bed, placing a protective hand over her belly. The baby kicked gently, a small, reassuring flutter. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the sudden, sharp loneliness that gripped her. She was in a hospital wing her husband had funded, at an event celebrating his generosity, in a room secured by her family, yet she had never felt more alone. The click of a door opening startled her. She looked up, expecting a nurse. But it was Isabella, a champagne flute in her hand, a malicious smile playing on her lips. She closed the door softly behind her, shutting out the world. The sanctuary had just been breached. "I thought I'd find you here," Isabella said, her voice a low, dangerous purr. She leaned against the door, an apex predator cornering her prey. The red of her dress was a slash of violence against the room's serene beige palette. "Hiding away. It's what you're good at, isn't it?" Chloe pushed herself up straighter, her hand instinctively tightening over her bump. "I wasn't feeling well. What do you want, Isabella?" Isabella took a slow sip of her champagne, her dark eyes roaming the luxurious suite. "This is nice. The perks of marrying into money. Or, in your case, the perks of having a well-connected uncle. Tell me, does Marcus know just how much you rely on your family name? He has this charming illusion that you're this self-sufficient, grounded woman. It's quite amusing." A cold knot of dread formed in Chloe's stomach. This was more than the casual cattiness from the gala. This was a targeted attack. "My relationship with my uncle has nothing to do with you, or Marcus." A sharp, humorless laugh escaped Isabella's lips. She set her glass down on a side table with a decisive click and prowled closer, her scent, something expensive and spicy, filling the small space. "Oh, but that's where you're wrong, darling. Everything about you has to do with me now, because Marcus is with me. Not in the way he's with you, obligated and bored, but with a real passion, the kind you've probably only read about in books." Each word was a poisoned dart, aimed with precision. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face, but a spark of defiance flickered within her. She would not let this woman see her crumble. Not here. Not now. "If you and Marcus have something going on, that is a matter of his own profound disrespect and lack of character," Chloe said, her voice trembling but firm. "It's a reflection of him, not a failure of mine. Now I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Isabella's smile widened, a cruel, triumphant slash. "Ask me to leave? This is his wing, his donation. In a way, I have more right to be here than you do. You're just the incubator for his legacy, a temporary vessel. Did you really think a piece of paper and a growing belly would be enough to hold a man like him?" She was close now, standing over Chloe, who remained seated on the bed. The power imbalance was palpable. "He's tired, Chloe. Tired of your quiet disapproval, your sad little eyes, your vanilla sensibilities. He needs a woman who challenges him, who excites him, not a porcelain doll who needs to be handled with care." Tears pricked at the corners of Chloe's eyes, hot and shameful. She blinked them back fiercely. "Get out! Or what?" Isabella taunted, leaning in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You'll tell him? Go ahead. He'll deny it. He'll call you hormonal, emotional, pregnant, and hysterical. Who do you think he'll believe? The mother of his child, who he sees as a fragile liability, or the woman who just helped him close the biggest deal of his career?" The truth of it struck Chloe with the force of a physical blow. Isabella had woven herself into the fabric of Marcus's life, not just his bed. She was his equal in the boardroom, a place Chloe had never been invited. Summoning a reserve of strength she didn't know she possessed, Chloe pushed herself to her feet. She had to get away. She had to find a place to breathe. "I'm not having this conversation with you." She tried to step around Isabella to get to the door, but Isabella moved to block her, her body a rigid wall of hostility. "We're not done," Isabella hissed, her mask of cool sophistication finally cracking to reveal the raw ugliness beneath. "You need to understand your place. You will smile for the cameras, you will have that baby, and then you will fade gracefully into the background. You will not make waves, you will not interfere. Do you understand me?" "Let me pass," Chloe said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. She pushed forward, her shoulder brushing against Isabella's. In that moment, something in Isabella snapped. The pretense of a verbal sparring match evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated violence. "Don't you dare touch me!" she snarled and shoved Chloe backward. The force was unexpected and brutal. Chloe stumbled, her arms flailing for balance. She crashed back against the edge of the side table, the sharp corner digging into her lower back. The champagne flute Isabella had left there teetered and fell, shattering on the floor, but Isabella wasn't finished. As Chloe cried out, more in shock than in pain, Isabella's face twisted into a mask of rage. She took a step forward, her expensive heel coming up. "You are nothing!" she spat and kicked. The blow landed squarely on Chloe's side, just below her ribs, knocking the air from her lungs. A blinding, white-hot pain exploded through her abdomen. She gasped, a ragged, desperate sound, and crumpled to the floor amidst the shards of broken glass. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of agony and terror. Her first thought, her only thought, was for the tiny, precious life inside her. Through the haze of pain, she saw the sweet door swing open, framing a figure in the hallway. The fight, she realized with a fresh wave of horror, was no longer private. Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing in the moments after the fall. The sharp, searing pain in Chloe's side was a constant, but a new, terrifying cramp was beginning to seize her abdomen. She lay on the floor, curled around her belly, the rough texture of the carpet and the sharp edges of broken glass pressing into her cheek. The world was a blur of muted colors and muffled sounds. Her breath came in shallow, panicked rasps. Through the open door, the distant, manicured sounds of the gala, a burst of polite laughter, the faint strains of a string quartet, seemed to be from another universe. Then, two sets of footsteps approached, one hurried and heavy, the other measured and calm. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus's voice, tight with controlled fury, sliced through the fog. Chloe tried to speak, to call his name, but only a choked sob escaped. She saw his expensive, polished shoes come into view, stopping a few feet from her. He was looking at Isabella, who stood frozen, her face a mask of shocked malevolence, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "She fell," Isabella said, her voice surprisingly steady, though a higher pitch betrayed her panic. "She was hysterical, screaming at me. She attacked me, and then she just tripped and fell." Marcus's gaze finally dropped to Chloe on the floor. His expression wasn't one of husbandly concern or terror. It was the look of a crisis manager, a man assessing a PR disaster. He saw the shattered glass, his disheveled mistress, and his pregnant wife on the floor, and his first instinct was containment. "Isabella, go outside. Wait for me in the main hall. Don't talk to anyone," he commanded, his voice low and urgent. He was already spinning the narrative, controlling the players. As Isabella scurried out, Marcus knelt, not beside Chloe but near her. "Chloe? Chloe, can you hear me? What happened? Are you hurt?" The questions felt rote, a script he was following. There was no warmth, No genuine fear for her or the baby, only a tense, irritated energy. She pushed me, Chloe whispered, the words scraping her throat. She kicked me! Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced at the open door, then back at her. Chloe, let's not be dramatic. You're emotional. Isabella said you attacked her. We need to get you up and get you checked out before this becomes a scene. The coldness of his words was a second assault. He wasn't listening. He wasn't even seeing her. He was seeing a problem that needed to be managed. The betrayal was so profound, it momentarily eclipsed the physical pain. He was choosing to believe the lie because it was easier, cleaner. It protected him. It was then that the second man in the doorway finally spoke. I don't think she's the one being dramatic, Mr. Thorne. The voice was calm, authoritative, and glacially cold. Both Marcus and Chloe looked up. Standing there was Dr. Robert Hayes, the director of St. Jude's. He was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair, steel-gray eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an air of unflappable competence. He wasn't in a tuxedo. He wore his doctor's whites, a stethoscope draped around his neck, looking as if he had just stepped out of surgery. His gaze was not on Marcus. It was fixed on Chloe, and his expression was one of deep, paternal concern, quickly hardening into a controlled fury as he took in the scene. Dr. Hayes, Marcus said, scrambling to his feet, his tone shifting instantly to one of deference. A small accident. My wife, she's a bit... I know what your wife is, Mr. Thorne. Robert cut him off, his voice sharp enough to draw blood. He strode into the room, his presence immediately commanding the space, dwarfing the billionaire. He knelt beside Chloe, his movements efficient and gentle. Chloe, can you tell me where it hurts? Don't try to move. His hands, cool and professional, began a gentle examination, his fingers probing her abdomen with an expert touch. He looked at her eyes, her coloring, his mind clearly processing a dozen medical variables at once. My side, she managed to say, tears now flowing freely, born of pain and the relief of seeing a friendly face. And my stomach, it's cramping. Robert's expression became grim. He looked up, his steel-gray eyes locking onto Marcus. Did you see what happened? I just got here, Marcus said quickly, defensively. Isabella said she fell. They had an argument. An argument? Robert's voice was dangerously soft. Is that what we're calling it? I was at the nurses' station down the hall when I heard shouting. I watched on the security monitor as that woman followed my niece in here. I watched as she stood over her, shouting, and I watched as she shoved a 7 months pregnant woman to the floor. The world stopped. Marcus stared at Robert, his face a canvas of disbelief. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The pieces were clicking into place, but they were forming a picture he couldn't comprehend. My niece. The words echoed in the silent room. Robert ignored him, speaking into a small radio clipped to his pocket. Code White, VIP Suite 7. I need a gurney, OB/GYN consult, and full trauma workup stat. Possible placental abruption. He then looked back at Marcus, and the professional mask fell away, revealing the cold, hard fury of a protective uncle. Your argument is over, Mr. Thorne. Get out of my way. The hospital, which minutes before had been a backdrop for Marcus Thorne's philanthropic triumph, transformed instantly into a domain where his power meant nothing. Nurses and orderlies descended on the suite with practiced, urgent efficiency, their focus entirely on the woman on the floor and the doctor giving quiet, precise commands. They moved around Marcus as if he were a piece of furniture, an irrelevant obstacle in their critical path. He stood by the wall, utterly sidelined, a ghost at a crisis he had orchestrated. The deference he commanded in every other aspect of his life had evaporated under the fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor. Here, authority wasn't measured in dollars or stock prices. It was measured in medical knowledge, in the ability to save a life. And in this realm, he was a pauper. Dr. Robert Hayes was the undisputed king. "Chloe, we're going to get you onto the gurney now. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but we'll be quick," Robert said, his voice a low, reassuring murmur meant only for her. He directed the placement of the spine board, the careful log roll, every movement designed to minimize jostling. Marcus watched, a knot of cold, unfamiliar fear tightening in his gut. "My niece." The words replayed in his mind, each repetition stripping away another layer of his composure. He had known Chloe had an uncle who was a doctor. She'd mentioned it casually when they first met. Dr. Robert Hayes. A good man, she'd said, had practically raised her after her parents passed. Marcus had filed the information away as trivial, a minor detail in the portfolio of the woman he was courting. He had never once considered that this unassuming family connection wielded more practical power within these specific walls than his entire fortune. As the team lifted Chloe onto the gurney, her eyes, wide with pain and fear, found his. There was no accusation in them, no anger. There was something worse, a deep, soul-crushing disappointment. It was the look of a woman realizing the man she had married, the man she was having a child with, was a complete and utter stranger. A man who, in her moment of greatest need, had offered not comfort, but calculation. "I'm coming with you," Marcus said, stepping forward as they began to wheel the gurney out. Robert stopped, turning to face him fully. The look in the doctor's eyes was not just anger, it was contempt. A profound, unwavering disdain that made Marcus feel small. "No, you're not," Robert stated, not as a request, but as an unbreakable law. "You will go to the family waiting room on the 3rd floor. You will sit there, and you will wait for someone to come and speak to you. You will not interfere with my staff, you will not try to pull any strings, and you will not go anywhere near your associate. Am I making myself clear, Mr. Thorne?" The use of his surname was a deliberate distancing, a formal severing of any perceived connection. Marcus felt a surge of his old arrogance. Who was this man to tell him what to do? He funded this hospital. He could have him fired. But the words died in his throat as he looked at the stony-faced nurses and the grim-faced uncle. He saw the security guards already materializing at the end of the hall, their presence requested by Robert's quiet radio call. He was trapped. "I'm her husband," Marcus managed, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "And I'm her family," Robert retorted, his voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with venom. "The family that is going to take care of her, since you so clearly failed to. Now go before I have you removed for obstructing patient care." He turned his back on Marcus without waiting for a reply and followed the gurney, his hand resting on Chloe's shoulder. The small procession disappeared around the corner, leaving Marcus alone in the violated suite. The air was thick with the smell of spilled champagne and antiseptic. Shards of glass glittered on the floor like fallen stars. Slowly, Marcus turned and saw Isabella being spoken to by 2 uniformed security guards down the hall. Her bravado was gone, replaced by a pale, pinched terror. Her red dress, once a symbol of power and seduction, now looked garish and cheap. Her eyes met his, pleadingly. "Do something," they screamed. For the first time, Marcus felt nothing for her. No desire, no loyalty. He saw her not as a passionate partner, but as a liability, a destructive force that had just detonated his carefully constructed life. He turned away from her and walked toward the elevators, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly cavernous hallway. He was going to the 3rd floor waiting room, just as he was told. The billionaire, for the first time in a very long time, was going to do exactly as he was told. The power had shifted, and he was on the wrong side of it. The 3rd floor waiting room was aggressively beige, a purgatory of vinyl chairs and outdated magazines. The lighting was institutional green, designed to soothe but succeeding only in making everyone look ill. It was a place for ordinary people, a place Marcus Thorne had never imagined himself occupying. He who could buy a private hospital wing was now relegated to a public waiting area, stripped of his phone by a polite but firm security guard, and left with nothing but the churning in his own gut. He sat, the fabric of his $1,000 suit feeling coarse and alien against his skin. An hour passed. Then another. The silence was punctuated only by the occasional soft chime of the elevator and the frantic internal monologue that had taken over his mind. He thought of Chloe. He tried to pinpoint the exact moment his affection for her had curdled into a kind of benign neglect. When they'd met, he had been genuinely captivated. She was a librarian at a private collection he was trying to acquire, and she'd possessed a quiet intelligence and a gentle strength that felt like an anchor in the whirlwind of his life. She didn't care about his money. She'd seemed almost annoyed by it. She loved books, quiet evenings, and long walks. For a while, he had loved those things too, because she loved them. Marrying her had felt like acquiring a rare, beautiful piece of art that brought a sense of peace and order to his chaotic world. But peace had become boring. Her quiet strength started to feel like judgment. Her contentment with a simple life felt like a lack of ambition, a silent reproach to his own relentless drive. Then Isabella had entered his life. She was a mirror of his own ambition, a reflection of his own hunger. She spoke the language of hostile takeovers and leveraged buyouts. Their affair wasn't just about sex. It was a meeting of minds, a validation of the rapacious, power-hungry man he was becoming. With Isabella, he was alive, electric. With Chloe, he was just a husband. He had told himself he could manage both. He could have the respectable, stable home life with Chloe and the thrilling, high-stakes partnership with Isabella. He saw it as a compartmentalization, a sign of his own brilliance at managing his assets. He never once considered the human cost. He never saw Chloe as a person who could be broken, only as a constant that would always be there. The image of her on the floor, curled in pain, flashed in his mind's eye. The sound of her choked whisper, "She kicked me." He had dismissed it. He had chosen, in that critical moment, to believe Isabella's clean, simple lie over Chloe's messy, complicated truth. Why? Because believing Chloe meant confronting his own monstrosity. It meant acknowledging that he had brought a viper into his home, into his life, and allowed it to strike the most vulnerable person he was sworn to protect. Believing Isabella allowed him to maintain the illusion that this was just a simple case of female hysterics, a situation that could be smoothed over with money and apologies. The waiting room door opened. It wasn't a doctor. It was one of his own lawyers, a shark named Peterson, looking rumpled and furious at being dragged out of the gala. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Peterson demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. "They won't let me see you. They won't tell me anything about Chloe's condition. And the hospital has Isabella Rossi detained in a security office. They're talking about pressing assault charges." "They have it on video," Marcus said, his voice flat, dead. "Everything." Peterson's face went pale. The legal mind whirred, processing the implications. "The director, Hayes. He's her uncle." "Marcus, this is bad. This isn't a man you can bully or buy. His reputation is unimpeachable. If he wants to bring the full weight of this hospital and the law down on you and Rossi, he can." The glass tower Marcus had built around himself, the one from which he looked down on the rest of the world, was beginning to show cracks. He had always believed that money was the ultimate power, the universal key that could open any door and solve any problem. But he was now facing a problem that money couldn't fix. He had betrayed a good woman, endangered his own child, and done it all under the roof of the one man who had the power and the personal motivation to make him pay for it in a way he had never imagined. "What do I do?" Marcus asked. It was a question he hadn't asked anyone in years. It was the question of a man who has lost control. Peterson ran a hand through his hair. For now, you do exactly what the doctor told you to do. You wait, and you pray. You pray that your wife and your baby are okay. Because if they're not, this city, this board, everyone, they won't see a philanthropist. They'll see a monster who let his mistress kick his pregnant wife. And there isn't enough money in the world to fix that. The ultrasound room was dark and quiet. The only sound the soft whirring of the machine and the rhythmic, amplified beat of a tiny heart. Thump, 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 thump. The sound was a lifeline, the most beautiful music Chloe had ever heard. Every beat was a reassurance that despite the trauma, her baby, her little boy, was still fighting, still there. Dr. Anya Sharma, the head of obstetrics, moved the transducer gently over Chloe's belly. Her face, illuminated by the ghostly green glow of the monitor, was a mask of calm professionalism. The heartbeat is strong and steady, Chloe. That's a very good sign. We're seeing some uterine irritability, which is expected after a trauma, but there's no sign of placental abruption. The baby seems to be well protected. A wave of relief so profound, it felt like exhaustion washed over Chloe. She closed her eyes, and the tears she'd been holding back finally streamed down her temples into her hair. They weren't tears of pain or fear anymore, but of overwhelming gratitude. When the examination was over and she was settled into a private recovery room, far from the VIP wing and its ghosts, Robert came in. He had shed his doctor's coat and was just her uncle again. He pulled a chair close to her bed, his presence a warm, solid comfort in the cold, sterile room. He didn't speak right away, just sat with her, allowing her the space to process. "He's okay," she finally whispered, her hand resting on her stomach. "The baby is okay." "He's a fighter," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." That was all it took. The dam broke. Chloe's composure shattered, and she began to sob. Deep, ragged breaths of grief for her broken marriage, for her lost innocence, for the terrifying realization of what Marcus had become. Robert simply reached out and took her hand, his large, warm palm enveloping hers, a silent, unshakable promise of support. "I was so stupid," she cried, the words muffled by her tears. "I saw it. I knew he was distant. I knew something was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was the stress of work, that it would get better after the baby came. I made excuses for him because I didn't want to believe the truth." "This is not your fault, Chloe," Robert said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "You are not responsible for his choices. You loved him. You built a life with him. You trusted him. The fault lies entirely with the man who broke that trust." They talked for over an hour. Chloe spoke of the loneliness, the feeling of being a possession rather than a partner, the way Marcus's ambition had slowly consumed the kind, attentive man she thought she had married. She told him about Isabella, the subtle digs, the open flaunting of her connection to Marcus, a campaign of psychological warfare that Chloe had endured in silence, ashamed to admit her marriage was failing. Robert listened, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. He had never fully trusted Marcus, seeing a ruthless glint in the man's eyes that he didn't like. He had hoped, for Chloe's sake, that he was wrong. Now his worst fears were confirmed. "He didn't even look at me, Uncle Rob," she said, her voice hollow. "When he came in, he looked at her. He wanted to manage the situation. I was just part of the situation." "He showed you who he is, Chloe," Robert said softly. "When a man shows you who he is, you have to believe him." He squeezed her hand. "But you need to know this. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone. I'm here. Whatever you need, whatever you decide to do, I will be right here." It was a promise that sunk deep into her bones, reinforcing a foundation she had forgotten was there. For years, she had relied on Marcus, her world shrinking to revolve around his. She had let her own connections, her own strength, atrophy. Now, in the wreckage, she was rediscovering it. A nurse came in to check her vitals. As she left, she smiled warmly at Chloe. "Your uncle is a good man. He moved heaven and earth to get you the best care tonight." Lying in the quiet darkness of the hospital room, listening to the steady, reassuring beat of her son's heart on the monitor beside her, Chloe felt a shift inside her. The fear was still there, as was the grief. But beneath it, a new feeling was taking root. A quiet, resilient strength. She was not just a billionaire's broken wife or a victim on the floor. She was Chloe Hayes, a name that had its own weight, its own power. She was a mother, with a child to protect. And she was the niece of a man who would move heaven and earth for her. Marcus had left her alone, but he had inadvertently led her back to her true family. And that, she realized, might be the greatest gift he had ever given her. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like she was the one holding the map. While Chloe rested, Robert Hayes initiated a quiet, methodical war. He was a man of science and logic, and he approached the situation not just as a furious uncle, but as a clinical strategist. He started with Isabella Rossi. Citing the assault on hospital grounds, he used his authority to have her phone and laptop confiscated by hospital security under a legal pretext to be handed over to the police, who were now officially involved. Then, he made a call to a man named David Chen, a former patient and a cybersecurity expert who owed Robert a life debt after a complex pro bono surgery on his daughter. "David," Robert said, his voice grim over the phone, "I have a problem. It involves a woman named Isabella Rossi and my niece. I need to know everything about her, urgently." The information came back within hours, and it was far worse than Robert could have imagined. Isabella wasn't just an ambitious mistress. She was a corporate saboteur with a history of targeting powerful men. She had worked for two of Marcus Thorne's biggest competitors in the past 5 years. Both companies had suffered mysterious data breaches and failed mergers shortly after her departure. She wasn't trying to win Marcus's heart. She was trying to gut his empire from the inside. The affair was just the tool she used to get close. Her hidden motive was pure, calculated destruction, likely for a massive payday from a rival. Robert printed the file and walked down to the third-floor waiting room. He found Marcus right where he'd left him, looking like a ghost in a bespoke suit. He wordlessly handed the file to him. Marcus read, his face growing paler with every page. He saw the timeline of Isabella's employment, the dates of the corporate disasters that had benefited his rivals, the shell corporations she had funneled money through. He saw evidence of her communications with a known corporate raider who had been trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Thorne Industries for the past year. The affair, the flattery, the way she mirrored his own ambition, it had all been a lie. A brilliantly executed long con. She hadn't loved him. She had been studying him, disassembling him, using his ego and his neglect of his own wife as weapons against him. The kick, the assault on Chloe, hadn't been a moment of lost control. It had been a calculated act of escalation, designed to create chaos, to isolate Marcus and make him more dependent on Isabella, perhaps even to cause a miscarriage that would emotionally cripple him and make him more malleable. The thought made him physically ill. He had been played for the fool. He, Marcus Thorne, the master of the universe, had been the easiest mark of all. Armed with this new, terrible knowledge, Marcus felt a cold, clarifying rage replace his fear. He finally understood the full scope of the threat, not just to his family, but to everything he had built. He stood up. "I need to see her." Robert looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Why?" "Because I need to hear it from her own mouth," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "And she needs to see that the game is over." Robert considered it for a long moment. Then he nodded and made a call to security. They brought Isabella into a sterile conference room. The fight had gone out of her. Her makeup was smeared, her red dress was wrinkled, and her eyes were wide with a desperate, cornered animal fear. 2 police officers stood by the door. Marcus sat opposite her at the long table. He slid the file across to her. "Was any of it real?" Isabella glanced at the first page, and her facade crumbled completely. A bitter, choked sound escaped her lips. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," Marcus said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "I need to know how stupid I was." She finally looked at him, and her fear was replaced by a flash of the venomous contempt he'd seen before. "You weren't stupid. You were easy. All powerful men are. You're so desperate to be seen, to be mirrored. You'll believe anything a beautiful woman tells you if she says it with admiration in her eyes. You wanted a partner in crime, not a wife. I just gave you what you wanted." She gestured dismissively at the file. "This was business. It was never personal. Chloe, she was just collateral damage, an obstacle. I miscalculated her connections, that's all. Collateral damage." The casual cruelty of the phrase hit Marcus harder than any of the corporate espionage. She was talking about his wife, his unborn child. He had handed them over to this serpent. "You kicked her," he said, the words feeling like shards of glass in his mouth. Isabella flinched. "I lost my temper. She shouldn't have pushed me." "You kicked a pregnant woman," he repeated, his voice rising, the cold control finally breaking. "You did it because you wanted to hurt her, to break her. You wanted to eliminate her. You didn't just want my company, you wanted my life. You wanted to burn it all down and take whatever was left." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw nothing. No soul, no remorse, just a hollowed-out shell of ambition. The desire he had felt for her, the connection he thought they had, felt like a phantom limb, a memory of something that had never actually been there. "You won't get a penny," he said, his voice turning to ice. "My lawyers will tie you up in court for the rest of your life. The police have this file. Your co-conspirators will abandon you to save themselves. You tried to destroy my family. Now I'm going to watch as you are utterly, completely, and professionally destroyed. It's just business, after all." He turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving Isabella to the cold comfort of the police officers and the ruins of her own making. He hadn't found closure, but he had found a terrible clarity. The serpent in his nest had been exposed, but the poison was still there, and he knew it had infected him too. Cleansing it would be the work of a lifetime. A week later, the meeting took place not in a lawyer's office, but in the hospital's airy, glass-walled solarium, a neutral ground filled with sunlight and lush green plants. Chloe, dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, sat on a cushioned bench, her Uncle Robert standing quietly a few feet behind her. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and steady. Marcus entered alone. He had aged a decade in the past week. The easy arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, weary humility. He had spent the days in a self-imposed exile, coordinating a multi-front war against Isabella and her backers, while wrestling with the wreckage of his personal life. He stopped a respectful distance from Chloe, his hands clasped awkwardly in front of him. "Chloe," he began, his voice raspy. "First, are you okay? The baby?" "We're fine," she said, her tone even, betraying no emotion. "The doctors are optimistic. They're keeping me for observation for a few more days, but we are both healthy." "Good," he breathed, a sliver of the tension leaving his shoulders. "That's all that matters." He took a tentative step closer. "I know that sorry is a meaningless word right now. It doesn't begin to cover the damage I've done, the trust I've shattered. I was arrogant, neglectful, and blind. I allowed a predator into our lives because she fed my ego, and in doing so, I almost destroyed everything I should have been protecting." He laid a thick folder on the bench between them. "This is a post-nuptial agreement drawn up by my lawyers. It gives you everything. The penthouse, the house in the country, a controlling interest in the Thorne Foundation, and a settlement that guarantees you and our son will be secure for the rest of your lives. It's yours, no conditions. I will walk away with my company and nothing else." Chloe looked at the folder but didn't touch it. "This is you trying to fix the problem with money, Marcus. It's what you always do." He flinched, but nodded. "I know. But it's the only language I'm fluent in right now. I am trying to show you, to prove, that I'm willing to face the consequences. I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back a fraction of your respect. I'll go to therapy. I'll change. I will do whatever it takes to be a father to our son, if you'll let me." His plea hung in the sun-drenched air. It was a heartfelt, desperate appeal from a broken man. The old Chloe would have been moved, would have seen the flicker of the man she once loved and reached for it. But she was not the old Chloe. She finally looked at him, her gaze direct and unwavering. "I believe that you are sorry, Marcus, and I believe that you will try to change. And for the sake of our son, I hope you do. He deserves a good father." A flicker of hope ignited in Marcus's eyes. "But I will not be there to watch it," she continued, her voice soft but absolute. "I can't. The woman you married, the one who would have forgiven you, she doesn't exist anymore. She died on the floor of that hospital room. The woman who is left knows that her priority, her only priority, is to protect her child. And I cannot, in good conscience, raise him in a house where his mother was so easily discarded. I can't live my life waiting for the next betrayal." She finally picked up the folder. "I will take this, not as a settlement, but as the starting point for our divorce. My lawyers will be in touch with yours. We will work out a co-parenting plan that is fair to our son. But our marriage is over." The finality of her words was like a judgment. Marcus sagged, the last of his hope extinguishing. He had offered his kingdom for a second chance, only to realize the queen had already built her own. Chloe stood up, placing a hand on her belly. "I am going to raise our son surrounded by real love, Marcus. The kind that doesn't require a contract. The kind my uncle showed me. I suggest you learn the difference." She turned, and, with Robert by her side, walked out of the solarium, leaving Marcus Thorne alone among the beautiful, growing things. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry. But in that moment, he was the poorest man in the world. He had lost his treasure, not because it was stolen, but because he had thrown it away himself. His path to redemption would be a long and lonely one. But for Chloe, her future was just beginning. A future she would build not on the ruins of her past, but on the unshakable foundation of her own quiet strength. This story is a testament to the quiet strength that resides in all of us. A reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to rise again. If Chloe's journey from heartbreak to healing resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more emotional stories about betrayal, resilience, and the unshakable power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.